Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Right on. So we're here, obviously, for training module best practices. Hopefully everyone's in the right place. My name is Robert Stagel. I'm a senior consultant with Master Control. So that means I go out and set up our new customers and help our upgrade customers with their upgrade process. Presenting with me is Kristen Solter from ITXM. Correct. Do you want to talk about yourself for a second?
I've been with ITXM for about 11 years now, held some various positions with them. One of which was my longest position, was the Master Control Administrator. So I did that for about 5 years. And I've taken a couple new roles since then, but it's still in my heart. So back I am.
Welcome back. So just a quick agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. Just going through some V11 implementation stuff and new implementation stuff. Those of you who are on V10 and don't have immediate upgrade plans, we're going to go through some best practices for you. Just some overall system maintenance best practices. And then for the second half, Kristen's going to talk Master Control in a movie. I'm excited to see that part. You're really going to get two totally different presentations today. Mine's kind of just bullet points. She has all kinds of pictures and animations, so you'll get the best of both worlds. One thing I do like to talk about with best practices, and as a configuration consultant, we get brought in to deliver best practice to our customers, right? Best practice does not mean only practice, right? And best practice is not appropriate for 100% situations. We recommend that if you're going to be making any major changes, upgrades, or if you're a new customer, engage with the consulting team, the professional services team, to come and help you. You can purchase, small hours from us if you just want to go over a couple questions, figure out what is most appropriate. But these are the ones, if you brought us into an empty room and asked us what the best practice was, this is where we'd go from. And then talk about your individual situations, right? So V11, for new implementations, is anyone here going to be a new V11 implementation? Got a couple. So we have lots of new imports with V11, right? There's a lot of new ways to get data into the system. We have new course web links, external training, trainer links, all these different things. But just remember, especially as a new customer with the training module, you really want to crawl before you run. There's a lot going on in the training module, and there's a lot of things that happen, right? So don't feel compelled that I have all this available to me, I need to use it all on day one. I tell this to all of my customers. Let's get your training module up and running. Let's get your training tasks firing. Because the other thing is, let's get your users comfortable with using this system as trainees. And then we'll start implementing exams, and then we'll start implementing some of the more advanced functionality. So external training and some of the other new features in V11. Remember, these features are not shortcuts. Okay, so just because we have external training doesn't mean great, I don't need to set up courses or job codes anymore, right? This is a way, if you don't know, to get external, outside of your system, training records into Master Control, right? So in the past, if you sent your sysadmin to Master Control for sysadmin training and you wanted to record that in Master Control, you have to create a course, you have to attach the user to the course, you have to fire the training task, and then group sign off, grandfather it, or whatever. External training now, this is only an import. You can say, Bob Stagel attended sysadmin training on July 21st. That gets loaded up. Again, only an import. And if you think about the shortcomings, it's not attached to a job code. So if you run training by job code, it's not going to appear at all, right? There is a course label, but it's not an official Master Control course, right? So there's some impacts there. You can't do retraining with it. Can't do verification. It's just a record in the system. And then directly attaching users to courses. This is kind of the same thing. Won't show up in job code reports, and really just more of kind of a one-off situation. You don't want to be using this and say, great, we don't need to configure job codes anymore, right? That's not the point of this. It's to give you some flexibility with your system, right? Because there are always one-off cases. There's corner cases. We've all seen them. But we still recommend that for the majority of your users and the majority of how you link users to job codes, or users to courses, is via job codes, right? So just a thing for new implementations and job code configuration, right? We get questions all the time about what's the best way to configure job codes, and we really recommend this job code hierarchy, right? The reason why we do this, because we could set up all of these job level that includes all these other courses, right? But then if those courses ever change, you have to go edit every single one of those job codes. So if you start the biggest piece of the wedge as you can, everybody trains to the quality policy. Everybody trains to the employee handbook, right? That's your all company job code. And then you drill down into, departments and then specific jobs, right? So that way, if you ever have to change something, you only have to change it once. Personally, I hate click busy work. I don't want to have to go and modify 100 job codes now that we have, a new course that came in that everybody needs to train to. You guys doing this today? I think we have a lot of existing customers in here. So we see a lot of this. This is all repeat for you guys. Good to hear. Okay, so the next one is a new best practice. This is actually a recent change to how we recommend we do our configuration. So who has roles attached to job codes? Pretty much everybody, right? Because that was our best practice. There's some great new functionality in V11 where from the job code you can click on the role and it'll bring up all the users. And there's a lot in there for that. For new customers, what we've moved to is to put users directly into the job codes, right? And there's a couple of reasons for this. When we have new customers, one of the biggest hurdles that we have to come over and help them understand is the role concept, right? A full license role, a view-only role. I've gone out to customer sites, configuration, spent a whole day just on that topic, literally, right? Because it's so confusing. And then why do I need to create 2 roles for job codes? Because there's full license role and view-only role. We can now, or we've always been able to, but we've shied away from it, put trainees directly onto job codes, right? We have an import where we can import that information so we can do it in mass. You can add the trainee to the job code or the job code to the trainee, so you can do it from both sides. All the reporting functionality works. We've had 2 customers who've done this. They've been running it that way for a little over a year now, and they've reported no issues or bugs with it. So this is an option with one exception, which is all company, because we should all have an all company role everywhere, right? And we don't want to add them to an all company role and then an all company job code. But this is a departure just recent this summer in how we handle and how we recommend new customers set up. There are a couple things you lose, and there are a couple situations where we still want to use roles. And again, that's kind of where you want to meet with your consultant and talk to them about it and understand what that would mean. And don't feel like you need to abandon what you do today to move to this. It works. The functionality from a trainee standpoint is exactly the same. The reports that you generate, training by job code, all those things, the way the tasks fire, everything is identical. The only difference is in how you administer your system. One of the reasons for this change is we got a lot of feedback, and more we see this. The IT department for our customers do not want to let training coordinators in to modify users and roles. That's a deal breaker. And the training coordinators need to be flexible enough that they don't have to submit a request into IT to say, hey, can you please put Jane into the quality administrator job code? Right? So this lets your training coordinator make those changes without having access to the user applet and without having access to the role applet.
Does
Right?
this matter, the version you're on? Or you're just saying this is the new best practices?
I don't think it should matter per version. I remember that you're on 8. 9, so I don't want to make any promises on that. I haven't tested it with 9 personally.
Well, I mean, we've done it that way in our test pathway before.
Yep.
Because, sometimes it's a pain, as you said, I have to have, the view only on the regular, and every once in a while we'll have some staff member that just doesn't follow any of the code, and for the hell of it, just add them on.
Yep.
And it seems to work, but it wasn't best practice, so we didn't do that routinely.
Yep.
But now you're saying it's okay.
It is, and we are recommending this for new customers. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you have a new user, someone puts the new user in, then a second person has to attach it all the training?
Well, so if you think about the new user creation process, right? Someone goes to the user applet and creates them. And then we're going to talk about user maintenance. A trainee record gets created in draft automatically, right? And you need to go ahead and approve that trainee record into release. While you're doing that activity, you'll have all the job codes available in the trainee record, and you can move those over on the shuttle applet, from available to selected job codes. So in some regards, it's a little bit easier, right? Because you have to go to that trainee record anyway. and you're the training coordinator, you're the one who has that subject matter expertise as to what they're going to need. So I know this is a big one. I was expecting a lot of raised eyebrows on this one. And we can talk about it some more if you want after. This is a short presentation. So I'm going to move on, but I don't have anything scheduled after this. So if you'd like to come and talk to me, that's fine. So training info cards and revision. When I say training info cards, I'm talking about trainees, trainers, job codes, courses. Right? We never rev those. Does anyone rev their training info cards? The reason why we never rev them is because it will break the report.
You mean a course?
Yep.
I was doing it just recently because we just started our second year.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed if I, instead of when we have new people come in, they don't want to review all the 2013 stuff. They want them to start reviewing 2014 stuff.
Yep.
So I would have to put an expiration date on the old 13 stuff.
Are those linked to a document?
Yeah.
Then wouldn't they just get the training link to the new document?
What I noticed in 10.1.7 is when I didn't rev it up, the old training files had the new version in it. Like if I had version 6 in 2000 of the document,
yep.
In 13 and then in 14, if I didn't rev it up and I just had the updated version of the doc,
yeah,
it was in their last year's training file of that version.
Of version 6, right? Isn't that what you would expect because it hasn't gone to version 7 yet?
No, it had the new revved up version in their it revved it up in their file.
In their completed training record?
Yes.
Right,
It did, and so I was like, oh my God, I have to prove that they trained on it last year.
Yeah.
So I was revving up, or I tell people if they don't want to rev it up and create a new course, they have to expire their old course. So the new people don't get both years.
Well, and I think that's why you just want to use the document revision and then the automatically launch training on linked info card approval option on the course. And then when that document revs, it'll go out as a new training task. You still should maintain that old.
It didn't.
Okay. Let's talk about that some more afterwards. Yeah? No, I'm a little freaked out standing up here. But so just the reason why we talk about this as a best practice and never revving them is if you do a test in your test environment, go home and rev your job code and then complete some training against that new rev. You'll see all your training records now appear twice, one for each rev of the job code, right? So we don't ever want to do that. We want to either recall that course or job code back to draft and then approve it back, right? Because a recall does not rev it. It just brings it back with the existing rev number. Or if you have edit rights, you can edit directly in the release vault, which is what we typically recommend. Because the other thing,
relaunch the training then when you release it again?
That's the other thing you have to be careful about is how that training is going to relaunch, right? Training module can be a little bit opaque, right, in terms of what's going on. And again, for the new customers out there, I recommend that you do a lot of, let me try this and test, see how it's going to behave before I do that in production, right? I still find a thing or two every month or so where I'm surprised. Who knew that if you change the link between the job code and the course, what is that word? The competency level, right? You go from none and you're like, oh, this is great. We're going to use competency and we're going to put in read and understand. Well, then everyone has to retrain to the new competency level, right? That wasn't apparent to me, and I recommended a customer do it, and then all these training tasks fire. So practice, practice, practice what you're going to do in the training module. So maintaining users is what I alluded to earlier, right? So new trainee records are created automatically when we create the user, and that's whether we create them via the UI or via import. That trainee record must be moved into the release vault for training tasks to fire, right? Temporary leave, we want to recall that trainee back to draft. That should pull the training tasks that are open back. There's some new functionality in version 11 with leave of absence where you can do the same thing, but this is another way for our V10 users to do that. Former employee, you want to move them to archive, so that way no more training tasks will fire. They're not clogging up your draft vault. Reporting still works. You can see all the completed training and all those records if you need a point in time. And then maintaining course-to-document relationships, right? This can be kind of a hassle if you're handing off between a doc coordinator or doc author and a training coordinator. We do have some tools in here. I don't know if everyone's taking advantage of these. Auto-create course is a really useful feature for things like SOPs where people always train, so you always need a course, right? So on your SOP info card template, info card type setup screen rather, at the very bottom there's a little checkbox for auto-create course. Now this requires a course template, which is basically a course that's not attached to anything and is not released, that has the numbering series you want to use, the vaults, the training coordinator, all those options on the course you can preset as part of your template. And then when you create a new document, that's automatically created, the course, right? And then you can use our packet item training flag to send a notification to the training coordinator to update that course and approve it. So this is just a way to automate that handoff between doc control and training coordinators. This button's available on all the packets. Probably didn't even notice it. It took me a while before I even clicked on it. But it can be really handy. The thing is, for this window to be active, right, this is the pop-up, for that to be active, there has to be a course attached, right? So if this document didn't already have a course, this button wouldn't do anything for us. But if you use the auto-create course, then your course is attached, and you can use that flag. And what this does is it sends an email notification, not a My Task, an email to whoever the course manager is, so they're notified that they need to make updates to that course. If you use exams or any of the other advanced, they need to set up a classroom setting, it's really handy for that because you can ping them and say, hey, this document's changed, you need to review the exam, you need to create a class for this, any of those other activities. Update your presentation, right, that's attached to the course as a training material. You can do any of that stuff. Is anybody using this today? I think I saw one, couple, yeah. So when you get back, go in your test environment, play around with that. It can be really handy. I know a lot of people build steps into their training routes or their document approval routes to notify training coordinator, things like that. You can do that or you can do this. And I'm going to pass it off to Kristen. She's going to go through Master Control in a movie.
So when I was preparing for this, I spoke with our current system administrator as well as some of our end users, and we started kind of brainstorming what I was going to put together, and it ended up kind of being a list of do's and don'ts, things we've learned through our implementation. We started with the training module in 2007, and we have a whole bunch of things that we've been very successful with and other things that we are still in the process of working through. And then knowing that this was going to be an afternoon session on day 2, I wanted to make it a little fun. So we came up with Master Control in a movie. So the biggest one that we've learned is have a plan going in. And you're going to notice with my slides, it's going to have a kind of a quote from the movie as well as some pictures, maybe some automations. We did not necessarily have a plan for our overall training module, company training module when we went into this. We went into it department by department, was going to come in kind of the inverse of what, do you go by Robert or Rob? Bob. Yeah. Mentioned with the job codes. As opposed to starting at the top of your overall and working your way down to the department, we did it the inverse, going department level and working your way up. Definitely use his way. We also let the departments kind of figure out how it was going to work best for them. There was not an overall training plan for them. Our quality department just said, thou shalt train. We didn't tell them necessarily how to train. And because of that, we ended up with very specific training modules all over the place. And as you're going to see in another slide, that becomes very hard to then interchange people. People go on leave, people leave the company, people take different jobs. So now we're kind of learning that for our own best practices, how to set up our own training modules globally in our organization. So have a plan. Oops, going backwards. Even if you have to borrow one. So whether that be from another master control client, someone else's success, someone else's failure, definitely have one. You want to think about how you're going to train. Another one of our areas was when we implemented, we thought about how our current system would work for the employees that were there at the time, not necessarily bringing on a new employee, how we wanted to train them. So the job codes we created were they were for a function. They weren't necessarily for we're going to bring a new employee in and how do we want to train that person. So it was one of the areas that we probably could have done better too. So again, existing staff, new staff, how you're going to train the organization, your department, your region. And should you do that, then you end up finding the treasure. By no means am I a movie buff. You can ask my husband on that. But I know that I remember things with pictures a little bit better than just text. So, anybody ever seen Spaceballs? Yes. Okay. So, no baggage. Another one of the lessons that we learned. So, not only did we have a hybrid system at one point in time, but we tried to even make Master Control fit our broken manual system. And then we're somewhat shocked when the problems in the broken manual system came up in Master Control. So your electronic system will not necessarily fix a broken manual process. You'll just start seeing that same breaks in the electronic system. Use the best practices of Master Control. Don't necessarily take your processes and try to force them into Master Control. So one of the things we hear all the time, I don't know about you guys, is why do you do a process? Because this is the way we've always done it. So consider moving forward with your best practices and leaning out processes. It's another thing that we've learned over the years, that because we've always done a practice and that's our only reason for doing it, we have all these things sitting out there. Now that we're going through it, we're figuring out, hey, we didn't need 500 SOPs, 500 training courses. We were training about 750,000 documents or training tasks a year. It was a lot. And we can actually lean that down. So this was kind of what I was alluding to earlier. In City Slickers, you had Curly, who had all the information. When he passed away, they were kind of left out there in the wilderness going, what do we do? How do we bring in the herd? And they had to learn all of those things on their own. So when you have one person leading the group, they're responsible for all the tasks, all the information. Difficult to wrangle in strays and not very easy to replace. So one of the things that we've determined over the years that it's easier to have multiple people that hold that position or that knowledge. So not only does that work well for your verifiers, your thankfully now course managers that you can put a role on it, yep. Training coordinators, but also even at a sysadmin level, it's always good to have someone that also has that knowledge, not only for the ability to hand that off should you need to, but to bounce ideas off of. So I know our current administrator will sometimes give me a call and say, what do you think about this? Do you think this will work? And we'll have a discussion and see whether or not we think what the pros and cons are to it. And if it was just me or it was just him, you don't have that interaction. So we end up with a much better product for our end users because we can have this type of discussions. Okay. Another kind of movie some people will know, Cutting Edge. Mm-hmm. So if you go halfway you get hurt. This was kind of the time when we were kind of doing the manual process. We had department also, when we didn't have a plan. Some departments chose to manually approve courses as opposed to having them automatically approved. Some were choosing to manually create the course as opposed to automatically create the course and verifier required. We had one of our largest departments actually chose this for a couple of their training courses and quickly found out that they did not want to have to sign off on over 300 training activities. So use the system. And as Patrick, the current administrator, says, if you're going to use the training module, use the training module. Don't just use it partially. Use the things that are going to be valuable to you. You don't have to turn on every bell and whistle, but try to use as much of the automation as possible as what's going to work for you. because otherwise you have to manually babysit the system, and that's not what it's there for. It's there to make your life easier. So, launching training. I envision launching training a couple different ways. One is, like the Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And it's a slow process, and some come, the first day, and then there's more, and then more and more, until you get to that big, long line of cars at the end. So that's a slow process, but I know that sometimes it can actually feel more like a stampede from the Lion King, and your Simba running away from it, going, oh my God, what's going on with this? Especially, if you haven't previewed your exam questions, not necessarily from an administrator standpoint, but from your training coordinator. If you don't do that, now that we have that option, sometimes a bad question will go out. You've selected the wrong answer. And I don't know about your end users, but ours will let us know right away that something's wrong with that. And then you get phone call after phone call, email after email, and you have to finagle things. So now that that option is there, and I think that came in 10, right?
I think so.
Make sure that you use it. And one of the ways that we're actually using it, I'm not going to say the dreaded V word of validation, but it's more of a verification. So we have our trainers or a particular group set up that have access to the preview exam questions. So after the person has created the exam, they'll come in, take a look at the exam, make sure that everything is good on it. And once everybody's fine with that exam, then we roll it out to everybody. The other big one for the training coordinators is making sure all those training links are made. I did get to see in the V11 upgrade training class earlier this morning that now it's kind of nice because you get to see whether it's in draft or not. That obviously wasn't there before. So you could have something that it was one of ours, but our biggest was archived more so than a draft, that someone had gone along the lines and archived a job code because they thought we didn't need it, archived an exam, archived something, and then when it goes out, again, the users find it immediately, especially those that like to log in and immediately take it. And then there's a lot of
and we also have that new in V11, the training, I think it's called training status, which tells you why your training task isn't firing, which will be amazing. Can't wait for that.
So, and I know most of you are very familiar with the training triggers. This was just something that I have used to train our users because train our end users to help them understand these training triggers, because I think that was a big hurdle for us. They didn't understand what they were doing in the system and how that was necessarily going to impact their training. So if they approved, they made a little change and approved the course, no big deal. And then they were shocked when all the training would go out, or they would make a change to the trainee and improve it. So trying to get them to understand the training triggers was one of our hurdles. And in doing so, we had come up with this little animation of an analogy of the pig. So the pig's on one side of the gate, and you want to get them to the other side. So your trainee has to be approved. The gate opens, he moves on. Your job code, same thing. Gate opens, he moves on. And now your course, you could get this pig to the other side with just your trainee job code and course, because you don't necessarily have to have an exam. You don't necessarily have to have a trainer. You don't even necessarily need a document per se. It'll let it go. But those are things that you want to look for, and by doing this, it's helped our end users kind of look for those training links too. And again, if all of those are approved, all of those are in place, then we get a happy pig at the trough. Oh, my favorite. Anybody ever feel like they're living this movie? Reporting in the training module. It's getting a lot better. I know in V10 they came out with the exam reporting, which has been very helpful to find some of those bad questions that you may not necessarily find otherwise, because people have enough right answers to pass the exam. And that one really awful question that everybody fails, but you don't know it, so you keep it on there over and over again. Now in V10, you can do that, but you need to make the reports easy and useful for the end users. You can do that with your managed columns and your charts. My former users are very graphical people. To give them a report that's 5 pages long really didn't mean much to them, but when we put in a bar graph or a pie chart, something along those lines, it took on more meaning for them. And also the automated reports and dashboards, that has helped too. We created a lot of automated reports. Granted, we had to rebuild those when we went from 7 to 10 because of all the changes, but we built a lot of pending training reports for a region, for a region within a region, and it helps our users to stay on top of it without having to go in and actually run a saved report, because it's being delivered to them in their email and they just have to open up a PDF. They will do that as opposed to log into Master Control and run a saved report. So that has really helped us too. So don't have a TPS report that nobody knows what it is or why they're doing it. Make sure that it's useful for them. Otherwise, there's no real point in spending the time to create it. And last but not least, my short circuit. The training module is alive. It is not static by any stretch of the imagination. I know ours looks nothing like it did when we implemented it in 2007. It is completely different now. So our documents look pretty much the same. We have new ones. Our numbering series may have changed a little bit, but overall, our documents have remained the same. Our training module, completely different. So don't be afraid of the change. I know our company's gone through a lot of changes over the years, but it's able to keep up with you on that. And you can make those changes fairly easily with the tools that have been presented for the new and also the older versions too, like 10. I don't know much about 9 since we skipped over it.
Yeah.
And again, we've learned a lot from our mistakes. I think we've learned more from our mistakes than our successes. But I think that's true for most folks. And then for those of you who are at our RUG for the Midwest, you'll recognize that last one, Let Master Control Help You. That was our theme for our RUG. Master Control is wonderful. They help us every step of the way. You use your consultants, tech support. If you're having an issue, configuration question, they are there to help you. Don't be afraid to give them a call or an email. So,
and use those test environments. Don't shut them down after validation's complete.
Yes. I know, for instance, when I go back, I'm starting to, it's documents related, but we're starting to build possibly a taxonomy organizer. Test it out there, present it to our user, our department who wants to use it, and then take that, move that over, as opposed to building it in production. Absolutely. Any questions? Yes.
Kristen, I have a question for either you or for Bob. We do exams, and a lot of our exams come from the blood bank. In blood banking, a lowercase k and an uppercase k are totally different. But in version 9 on exams, it sees that answer as the exact same answer and sees the answer as a duplicate and messes up the questions. Is that a bug in 9, or is that just...
Yeah. Hey, Dave, did you hear that? Can you...
Yeah, actually that's been addressed, but not how. We just fixed it.
totally fixed in 11.1? Because we've had to come up with, and all blood banking, I mean, almost every letter of the alphabet, we have an uppercase and a lowercase that means something different. And blood bank is where we have almost all of our exams. And, I mean, we have to QC every exam several times, try every answer multiple times.
Yeah.
Because our answers, you'll see all four will say they're duplicates and they're not. So we've had to get really creative by saying uppercase K, lowercase k, or putting a space before the lowercase and no space in the uppercase. So, I mean, have you come up with that at all, Kristen, when you're doing, do you use exams yet?
We do use exams. I know we ran into a similar situation. It wasn't necessarily the uppercase and lowercase that you were talking about, but it was that our our answers would start off the same. So it'd be the first 3 words may be identical,
Yeah.
and then the last were what changed, and that's what made the difference.
But it's still saw it as duplicate.
Exactly. I don't think we've had too many issues with that. It could be that our users are just very used to that issue and that they've found their own ways around it, like you did. So I can't say whether or not that was fixed, but
It's fixed in 11.1.
Upper and lower.
Okay, thank you. Now I know. Make sure.
Okay. Yep.
I found that we have a problem with degree. Sometimes it'll take the symbol for degree and sometimes it won't, it'll make it 0.
Yeah.
That's in the rest.
special character.
I probably with the same fix, Dave. What do you think?
I'm not sure, I mean, that
See,
would
like
fall into the kind of special code for set.
Yeah.
situation. My understanding was those were all fixed, but I don't know anything specific. So,
Yeah. And you guys know the new feature in V11 with the pictures and exams?
Yes.
So
Thank
that'll
you.
be really helpful.
We had to make attachments and put them in the documents module and say, see attachment, question.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions that we want to talk about?